Hi, I'm Adam Shepherd.
And I'm Jane McCallion.
And you're listening to the ITPro Podcast, where this week we're talking about data.
Building a data-driven business has been a goal for many organisations over the years, but it's fraught with challenges. Regular listeners will be familiar with the benefits of increasing the level of data literacy within an organisation. But how can businesses do this effectively without overextending their data teams?
This week, we're joined by Richard Speigal, leader of Nationwide's BI Centre of Excellence, to discuss the strategies he's used to boost the awareness of and engagement with data across the building society, as well as the technology and toolsets that are helping Nationwide to make the best use of its data assets. Richard, thanks for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks ever so much for having me.
So, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about your role at Nationwide?
Okay, so I guess I wear two hats. I'm lead the BI Solutions Centre of Excellence, which basically means I run a large BI team. There's about 30 of us in all who build BI solutions. If you're not sure what BI is or business intelligence, think dashboards. We build dashboards for people across the organisation. So I'm also wearing another hat now, a new hat as a product owner of BI self-service enablement, and that's quite a new strategy, which I'm sure we'll talk about on the call. Our job is ultimately to give BI tools to people across the organisation to build their own insights from, and not be reliant on a central team. So, yeah, it's a fairly broad role. Just for clarity, I will add that I'm a data analyst. So I think about things very much at the insight end of analytics. What's the business value? What decisions can the organisation make as a result of data? I'm not a data architect or a data engineer, so if it veers into that, I'll shout.
So, Richard, before we sat down to record this, you mentioned that Nationwide is moving away from data warehousing as a strategy. Why is that?
I'd love to find the guy whose idea of data warehousing was. Look, it was a great idea. It sounded very neat on paper. The idea with data warehousing is that you take all the data from all the different sources and you stick it in this lovely pot that's all neat and tidy, and everybody can access the data warehouse and use that to build out their insights. So I think in reality, engineering can become quite separate when they're building out data warehouses. It's often the case that they could be sitting in a basement, not talking to the business or the insight functions, figuring out what data actually needs loading. From my end of things, it can also be slow. As an analyst, if I want to add a new data source or add additional columns to a table, I've got another hoop to go through. I've got to go through an engineering function to get that to happen. So the reality with data warehousing is it can end up quite slow. Speed of data is another issue, especially in financial services. I mean, you've all got mobile apps. You probably get a ping from your bank when your balance goes over or under a certain amount. You need speed of data for that to happen. And again, data warehousing, that can be an issue. You're adding a different layer where you're moving data from point to point, and that takes time, especially with big data sets. So, yeah, it was a nice idea. Our CDO, Simone Steele, has put us on a different path now, one which it's called the data fabric. And the idea with the data fabric is that we have domain-centered pots of data. And it's, I guess, in the sense, it's lots of mini warehouses, but they're domain or subject matter driven. So we can build things out. We can build the data estate out effectively in parallel. I mean, it's another great big corporate idea, and a lot of books are going to get written about it, and people are going to make careers on it. And who knows if it's going to work? I mean, I can say, let's give you a practical example. We've got a team in the society, a team that uses Adobe Analytics. It measures our website traffic. And I think they're a brilliant example of what the data fabric could look like, because these guys know their data inside and out, but they provide tools for accessing and analyzing the data. They provide training to anybody that wants to listen on how to use the data. And they've started putting the data in other places, easier to, that BI tools can consume. So you can consume their data from anywhere, and they'll help you understand it. That's a great example of data fabric. I mean, I'm sure there will be some variants. We'll have other teams that will set data sources up and probably, they'll do less of a good job. Here's the data, here's some rows and columns, and that's all they'll tell us. And we're going to get a variance in between, and that's all stuff to be figured out. But broadly, I think the data fabric idea sounds a lot more pragmatic and achievable than data warehousing ever was. It tried to bite off more than it could chew.
We recently published a panel feature on kind of building a data-first culture, and one of our panelists mentioned that at their previous role, they didn't have so much a data warehouse as a data cupboard where they just opened the door, flung the data in, and just shut the door again.
Yeah, we sometimes call it the data swamp. Yeah, that can often happen. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a nice little analogue to the idea of a data lake as well, which, as you're talking about data warehouses, I've realised that I haven't heard that phrase until I just said it for a good couple of years.
I don't know if I just invented one there. Yeah, the data lake is a data swamp. You normally need a layer on top that kind of cleans things up. But yeah. It's data. We're all figuring it out. Yeah.
It's what happens when your data gets stagnant.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So it sounds, especially from your new role, like you kind of when you're pushing this out to end users, if you like, to make it a bit closer, a bit more useful to people working across the business. That must involve building up a layer of data literacy amongst people who are perhaps not traditionally involved in looking at data as much. How are you approaching this task across your business?
Absolutely, no, that makes sense. And in fairness, there's figures to back this up. So Accenture and Click did a bit of research that said 90% of finance employees recognise data as an asset, but less than a third of them felt fully prepared to work with data on a day-to-day basis. So I'll tell you, well, this came up on another panel discussion, actually. I'll tell you where not to start first. Don't start with senior leaders. I hear this all the time. Oh, you go to the MD. Do you know what? The MD doesn't care about your dashboards and your data literacy program, because senior leaders tend to be very time poor. They're probably not going to go and self-serve data on a dashboard. They haven't got time. So the idea that you have to have senior buy-in to get data literacy launched, I'm not massively into. I think you will find the odd senior leader that loves to self-serve data, but it's not a thing. So don't get hung up on it. I think it's better to find the people that are feeling the pain. The people who report to the senior leaders. Senior leaders ask blunt and short and simple questions that are hard to answer. How do we sell more mortgages? Well, go to the middle management, the people are feeling the pain of that, the people that are having to prepare the PowerPoint packs and the insight, who are actually having to do the heavy lifting with numbers to make a data-backed decision. So we start with them, or start with operational teams, people that are having to use data in a day-to-day role to answer questions for senior leaders that result in a change. So that's the first place we go to. And we've got a few things. We've got it's going to vary from depending on your organisation. We've got a very good intranet nationwide, so we've started off with publishing training materials and courses on there for anybody to be able to access. Then we've honed it down with this sort of fit to fly idea and on employee education with data. And ultimately with that, we're trying to get business intelligence and analytics people talking to the business and sharing best practice. So we run a lot of events through the month, which are getting increasingly busy, actually. We have a BI forum every month now that we regularly have over 100 people at.
Wow.
And those will vary. I mean, with very broad topic matters. So we'll have people come along from various parts of the business and they'll say how they've used data to make a decision that's either reduced a risk in the business or saved the business some money. And then some of them will be very technical discussions about how to build a great dashboard, how to do a particular analytical technique. So it's all about information sharing. I will give a shout out because there's something that we just tried a few weeks ago, sort of broader data literacy event that my colleague Ellie Penny ran, actually. And this was meant to be for anyone, literally people with no technical skill. I mean, Excel was a bonus as far as we set the bar. And it went brilliantly. She did. A lot of people, for them, data is rows and columns and it's boring and it's Excel, but she really brought it to life with lots of examples of how we all use data every day. You've probably got a Fitbit, you've probably got a banking app. You are used to seeing data visualization. You just perhaps didn't realize it. And certainly through COVID, we've all seen enough bar charts. So that was broadening the audience out greatly. And I'd love to see us do more on that over the coming year, actually, and expand the audience. So yeah, I hope that helps. It's about engagement, constant engagement, easy access to training material, and telling people why it matters to them.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because getting employees to engage with data is, first of all, absolutely key for any kind of data strategy, but it's also something that I know a lot of organizations and a lot of data leaders have struggled with, getting employees outside of the traditional kind of data heavy worlds, like, finance departments, IT departments, data departments themselves, etc. Getting people in HR or marketing or, whatever it might be, to actually proactively engage with data is something that's been a challenge. And those are some really interesting kind of techniques. Has there been anything else that you found particularly effective?
We did actually. Yeah, there was one that we built out. It's called the visual vocabulary. So, I mean, as a data analyst, I suppose my core skill is data visualization. It's my personal speciality.
Mm.
Now, weirdly, you say that marketing must be the hard audience and finance must be the easy win. It's actually the complete opposite. Finance people are my hell. They're my nightmare.
You might be in the wrong job.
Seriously, bear with me on this. And there's a lot of BI people out there who are going to completely understand what where I'm going with this. The thing with finance people is they are very data literate, they're very numerate, and they're very used to spreadsheets. So you build them a visualization and you say, look, I've built a bar chart and it's really easy to see, which products are selling and which ones aren't. And they go, but I've got a spreadsheet for that. Now, then they know that inside and out. And when they see a dashboard, the first thing they want to do is export to Excel. So they're actually a pretty tough audience. The easier audiences are the people that don't like looking at spreadsheet and rows and columns of data. They use visualization to instantly see patterns and make decisions. So one of the practical things that we did in one of the BI tools, we've got ClickSense, which we've got a couple of thousand users on in nationwide. We built out a thing called the visual vocabulary, which was a complete rip-off of something that the FT did some years ago. And they did a fabulous poster, and the poster had all the different sort of categories of ways of reasons to visualize data. So it might be showing, perhaps you wanted to show correlation between two things, and they showed you all the charts that were appropriate for that, and they broke it down into 6 or 7 categories. And he thought, well, tell you what, I mean, there's a lot of charts, a lot of visualization techniques. Why don't we put them all in a workbook? And we can show people all the different charts and styles and ways there are of visualizing data. And we put them all in one place, and we built them in a BI tool. So it's very interactive. So people have now got this resource. Developers have got it and they can learn how to build certain visualizations with it, but users can now go and look at it. And it creates a fabulous conversation because they'll be looking at a problem and going, oh, well, I need to visualize cross sales between mortgages and credit cards, for example. How do I do that? And then we open up the visual vocabulary. We can rip through lots of different charts and styles and have a very literate conversation with them about the best way to solve their business problem and get them to the insight that they're after. So that was a very practical win. And any BI team, I'd recommend doing it.
It's interesting the point you make about finance people being a particularly tough nut to crack in terms of data. The question I'd raise is, if they're already comfortable with using spreadsheets and kind of working with data on, perhaps a slightly more advanced kind of intermediate level, do they need dashboards? Because I've always thought about dashboards in particular as a way to engage with data that doesn't require having to, learn a bunch of formulas and spreadsheets. If people already know how to do that, do they need dashboards at all?
Yes, is the short answer, and that's not because they need it; it's because their audience needs it. And it's it's an issue with finance functions. They will walk into a meeting with a spreadsheet, and they'll tell the organisation how they're going to spend our money this year. The reality is most people find that a very difficult medium to navigate. And when storytelling is such an important part of data. If you're going to get people to move and make a decision, it needs to be clear. So yes, they may not need visualization in their day-to-day, but their audience does. When the senior leader's looking at things, it's much easier to see numbers visualized than it is to see them in their raw form. So that's yes, I think they've got it's incumbent on them to be good storytellers. and not trap everything in the spreadsheet world. The other issue is sophistication. You can only do so much with a spreadsheet.
I think there's a lot of people that.
Well,
I'm team spreadsheets for life here.
What was the? Do you remember the COVID? They got some of the COVID numbers completely wrong because they were doing it in Excel and it bust the 64,000 row limit. I think
Yes.
there you go. Now there's a great example of where spreadsheets just can't handle very large data volumes. You need BI tools and decent data engineering and data architecture to back it up. To work with the volumes of data that we have to, and still turn them into something that the human can digest and understand. So look, I'm still, Excel is arguably the most successful BI tool in the world. Everybody gets it, everybody understands it, but it does have its limitations, and I think it's a barrier to good data storytelling. And if organizations are going to get the most from their data, they need to understand their data, and you need to find the best form to tell that story. So I will always bang that drum.
Yeah, it's about not so much incoming data to a department as outgoing data. Pivot tables are all very well, but as you say, Excel doesn't really lend itself to storytelling.
Exactly. Yeah, it's exact. Something has to come out of the end of the sausage machine. We're all awash with data. We can be very clever with our analysis, but what comes out at the end has to be a decision. That's what good BI is all about. It's about decision making. How's the company going to change a thing that they're doing to benefit their members, in our case, or your customers? If you can't answer that question, then why are you doing it in the first place? We have to make a decision. So
because it makes me feel clever.
Fair. Okay, fair.
Shout out to our managing editor, Maggie, who is on the receiving end of my ones. And she's just like, I've made one. It has formulas and it replicates itself everywhere. You've spoken about the goal of building a self-service culture when it comes to data. So what role do dedicated data teams play in this kind of environment?
Okay. I'll set the background a little bit on this. It's a total of about 2,500 people using BI tools in total. We've got a couple of tools, ClickSense and ThoughtSpot. This is the reason for the new hat that I'm wearing, ultimately. Previously, the role of the central data teams was to provide solutions to the business, which was great, but you've never got enough hands. You're never going to keep up with the amount of demand that the business has for insight. So the new idea is that we federate. We're calling it federation. I think we probably need to find a better word. BI self-service enablement. We need to start giving our tools to other people in the organizations to solve problems. And at the moment, the 2,500 people who are using the tools are generally end users. They're not people that are building solutions or working with the data at its raw form to produce an answer. They're just consuming dashboards. They're consuming numbers that have been set up for them, which has been great, but we're limited on capacity. So the answer is we've got to get those tools out into other teams in the business, other satellite insight teams of very numerate, very specialist people who know the data inside and out, so that they can start producing the insight around the business and create a kind of force multiplier effect. It's much better for me or my colleagues in our team to train 10 people to make their own solutions than it is for us to try and build anything. So that's ultimately the direction that we've gone in. And I've got a couple of really good examples because we've got some teams that are already semi-federated who've done some brilliant work. They often come up with better things than we could do as a central team, actually. Last year, the procurement team were definitely our heroes around the business. There's a lot of different finance systems in the business, and our procurement team are in charge of buying things and moving money around and raising purchase orders and all that lovely fun stuff. But ultimately, what we're really interested in is how safe is our supplier base. And when COVID hit, that was a big worry. There was obviously GDP dropped through the floor. We were very concerned about critical suppliers perhaps going bust. So procurement used the BI tools to pull together lots of information about our suppliers all into one place. And that's the key. It's not that we didn't have this information about our suppliers, But the fact that we could put everything in one place, so who is the supplier? What open contracts have we got with them? What's their credit score ratings looking like at the moment? What's their share price looking like at the moment? Pooling all of this quantitative and qualitative data all together in one place allowed us to very quickly triage where we had a problem with the supply base and where we needed to address it. There was also a happy outcome from that. Actually, one of the things that Nationwide, and we are a mutual, we're not a bank, so we're kind of lovely. We're at the lovely end of banking. That's the way I like to think of us. And we do try and do the right thing. And one of the things, given what was going on with the economy, there was distress in the going on in the world, and particularly for small businesses. Everything was turned on its head, and we thought, well, wouldn't it be kind of nice why don't we pay all the small businesses early? Let's relieve some of the stress where we can. So using the same system that team had built themselves, we were very quickly able to identify all the businesses of a particular size and in particular market segments who had out money that we owed them. Perhaps it wasn't due yet, but we paid it anyway. We paid it early, and we turned that project around in a week. So
Wow.
Now this was all done not by the central BI team. That was the wonderful thing. It was done by a satellite team who we'd just given the tools and the training to and helped them set up their connections. So it was brilliant. We've got another one actually, who's my current superstars, is internal audit. Now nobody in the business is friends with internal audit except the BI team, and because it turns out they're fantastic BI developers, and they've just introduced a hot topic at the moment is process mining, which is, I guess, in simple terms, it's looking at customer journeys, it's looking at the route people go through, what can often be very, very complex processes. Imagine you open a current account. That's a process. How can we make that quicker for you? How can we make it more seamless for you? So they invented a thing with a BI tool that you load data into. You can load a sort of an event log of things that have happened for a customer, for a member. And it shows you all the routes that customers have gone through. Most importantly, it shows the ones that weren't working. Now, the amazing thing with this is these guys have got really collegiate about it, because they've built this tool and they've said and they used it for a particular, we were looking at data subject access request, DSARs. So it was a particular data privacy process. But they realized that this tool that they built with ClickSense in this instance could be used for any customer journey. So internal audit, who are normally the most closed shop in the organization, are now saying, look, guys, take this tool, load your own data into it, do your own process mining. And that's wonderful for me. I mean, that's literally the moment we have given those guys a fishing rod. They've taught themselves to fish, and now they're teaching everybody else to fish. And this force multiplier that we get by enabling these people with BI tools is quite phenomenal. And it's certainly something we could never have done if we tried to operate centrally. So that's the broad strategy and the general. That's my year's goal, actually. If we get Federation stood up really deeply in the business, then I'll be a very happy man.
How many teams do you currently have, operating under this federated model?
Well, the target is 12. To be honest, it wasn't the greatest target setting in the world, because we've got around 20 already loosely federated. So
congratulations on exceeding your target.
I've got the loveliest boss. Yeah.
Well, you know what they say: overpromise and underdeliver.
Absolutely.
The other way around.
I've already
a Freudian slip there.
It's slightly loaded. I mean, they're all at different stages. So I guess the question is, we've got a target of 12 teams who we would consider mature by the end of the year. So the sort of people that need almost no help from us at all. And they're all at various stages. So yeah, I think we're in a good place on that. And it's interesting that it's literally the broadest range you can imagine: internal audit, procurement, finance, marketing, people and culture, which is HR for us. There isn't a corner, I don't think, of the business that aren't using these tools, which is wonderful to see.
When it comes to data visualization tools, what is it that you look for in particular in one?
Oh, you've just asked the toughest question. In fact, we did a thing called the BI Battle last year, where we compared lots of BI tools, and it was a bit of a slugfest. I mean, look, everybody's got their favourite. The big three are ClickSense, Tableau, and Power BI from Microsoft. And everybody asks me, and I've used all three in production. So, and everybody says, "Oh, which one's the best, Rich?" There is no best. They're all great. They have their strengths and weaknesses. I mean, we picked ClickSense because ClickSense has got the ability to load and transform data built in. And when you've got a difficult data estate, or one that's, with the data warehousing project, didn't quite work. So we have, that was the best tool for us. But the other tools have equal. I mean, to be honest, I'm privately, and I do visualize data as a hobby as it goes, and then competed in some competitions. I am that sad. My first choice for visualization is Tableau. Absolutely love it. Really supportive community. Power BI, I mean, come on, it's Microsoft. It's a comfort blanket. If you've only ever used Excel and never dipped your toe into BI, it's an easy one to go to. So if anybody's out there wondering which one's the best tool and really putting themselves through the ring or trying to make a choice, don't. One of those three tools and you're going to be in a good place.
So speaking of advice, what advice would you have for organizations that are wanting to increase their data literacy throughout the organization?
Okay, well, I'll reiterate, don't necessarily start with senior leaders, number one. Number two, find the people that are actually feeling the pain of dealing with data every day. So middle management is a classic. Operational teams are a classic. Obviously, you'll have, if you're a big organization, you've probably got separate insight functions around the organization. So engage with those people first. And look to give them a tangible time saving in their day to day. Ultimately, what you're trying to get to is everybody in the organization. No, we talk very heavily about data enabled decision making, and to a large extent, as a purist, I don't think any decision should be made in an organization without looking at what the data says first. You should be making an informed decision. That's a data literacy message, and I think that comes in a sense secondary, in the sense that you need to stand up some business intelligence first, get some stuff in front of users, then follow it up with some good data literacy training, challenge people on how they're reading numbers and charts, make them fight and argue with the data a little bit. That's always a good thing. So I would say, I think what I'm saying is start in the middle, ignore the top, and then flesh it out at all levels later as a broad order.
So, Richard, predictive analytics is something that a fair amount of people within the data world are kind of talking about and exploring. Is this something that Nationwide is looking into at all?
Yeah. It's the ability to explain the algorithm. I'm going to go back to storytelling. That's the bit that we're, if you can't explain what decision the computer's making, then it's not going to fly, particularly in financial services. I mean, I don't know what the other banks are doing. We certainly are not we're not pushing any idea that the machine is going to make a decision. It can support human decision making, but it's certainly not a road that we go down at the moment.
Yeah, especially in an organization, in the field that you guys are in, I would imagine it's the explainability is something that's absolutely key, especially with the regulatory attention that's being given to that kind of specific kind of algorithmic decision making recently.
Well, absolutely, and quite rightly, frankly, thank you to the regulator for kind of keeping us honest. Yeah, I don't like the argument. We don't want black box decision making. I'm sure the models are really smart, but models are capable of going wrong as well. So, I mean, there are cases around the business. Anti-money laundering, I think, have used it. Risk have done some predictive stuff, but all they've done is use modeling and predictive modeling to find things that a human perhaps needs to go and have a look at. It's triaging priority points to look at, but it's certainly not. It's still down to a human to make an actual decision, and that's a core principle that I'd like to see enshrined, to be honest. which is weird, I guess, because I suppose we're trusting these things to drive our cars, but I don't particularly want it to make a decision about my bank balance. So
Well, one of those is much more dangerous than the other, of course. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week, but thank you once again to Richard for joining us.
Thanks, team. That was a lot of fun to talk about. I could talk about that all day long, so I hope it's piqued some interest.
You and me both. You can find links to all of the topics we've spoken about today in the show notes and even more on our website, itpro.co.uk.
You can also follow us on Twitter, where we are at ITPro, as well as Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
Don't forget to subscribe to the ITPro Podcast wherever you find podcasts to never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and a review. We'll be back next week with more analysis from the world of IT. But until then, goodbye.
Bye.
The ITPro Podcast is brought to you by the Dennis Podcast Network.